All right, let's do it. Asia. We're going to conquer it today, at least virtually,
Virtually, right?
with the help of Conquer Asia, your ultimate travel blueprint. This guide is going to help us plan a dream trip. It's got everything.
It does. It does.
Destinations, budgeting, cultural highlights, really like the whole nine yards.
The works. Yeah.
Right.
It really is like having a personal travel expert in your back pocket,
Ooh, that's good.
especially for our listeners who, thrive on that kind of efficient learning, right?
RNs.
This guide really breaks things down in a way that is perfect for them.
Yeah, and one thing that occurred to me right away, Asia is, well, it's enormous.
It's huge.
I mean, Southeast Asia, East Asia, South Asia, Central Asia. It even touches the Middle East.
Right.
Where do you even begin with a continent this massive?
Right. And that's one of the first things this guide tackles. It breaks Asia down by region, so you're not just overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all.
Oh,
Makes the planning process way less intimidating.
yeah.
Like, say you're drawn to those vibrant cultures, those bustling cityscapes. The guide suggests maybe start with Southeast Asia. Thailand is a popular choice, that classic blend of Bangkok's energy, the markets, and then you've got those serene beaches like Phuket.
Yeah, Thailand is definitely high on my list. But what about someone looking for something maybe a little more, I don't know, off the beaten path?
Oh, I see. You want something a little more unique, a little more undiscovered.
Exactly.
Well, the guide points to Vietnam for that kind of experience.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It highlights Ha Long Bay, those iconic limestone formations rising out of the water.
Yeah.
It's just breathtaking. And then for those who, crave a bit of adventure, it suggests the rice terraces of Sapa,
Ooh, yeah, I've seen photos. They're stunning.
aren't they? And then for something completely different, there's Hoi An with its charming lantern-lit streets.
Okay, now those all L sound amazing. And while we're talking about unique experiences, I did notice the guide goes beyond just destinations. It really emphasizes cultural immersion, which I love. It actually defines it as engaging with local traditions and customs, ways of life, not just seeing the sights, but understanding the heart of a place.
It's about really getting under the skin of a place, right? Not just being a tourist, but experiencing it as the locals do.
Yes. And one of the ways that suggests you do that is through festivals.
Festivals, yeah, those are brilliant for that.
They are. It talks about China's Lantern Festival, where you've got thousands of these colorful lanterns illuminating the night sky.
It's magical.
Oh, I bet. And then Thailand's Songkran,
Ah, Songkran,
a giant nationwide water fight.
basically.
Sign me up.
It's so much fun.
But I have to admit, when I think of cultural immersion, one of the first things that pops into my mind is food.
Oh, of course. Food is such an integral part of any culture.
It is.
And the guide totally gets that. It doesn't just, list off cuisines. It really dives into the actual experience of enjoying those local dishes.
Oh, I like that. Give me an example.
Sure, it talks about savoring expertly crafted sushi in Japan. Imagine that, the precision, the freshness, the artistry of it all.
Ooh, yes.
Or picture yourself sitting at a street stall in Vietnam, the aroma of pho in the air, that fragrant broth, those tender noodles.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Doesn't it? Or even, imagine sharing a traditional thali in India. You've got all these little bowls, the medley of flavors and textures all on one plate.
Yeah, that's what I call a feast for the senses.
Yeah.
And speaking of experiences, I noticed the guide has a whole section devoted to unique activities.
Oh, yes. Tailored to different interests.
Exactly. It recognizes that travelers have different motivations and caters to that.
It's very smart that way.
If you're an adventure seeker, it recommends hiking the Annapurna Circuit in Nepal.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
It is, right. It doesn't even try to sugarcoat it. It straight up says it's a challenging multi-day trek through the Himalayas. But then it gives this little tip. It recommends hiring a porter
Go smart.
to help carry your gear so you can really just focus on the scenery, the experience.
Makes sense.
Now, if you're more of an underwater adventurer, it suggests diving in the Philippines' Palawan region.
Ah, Palawan. Known for those pristine waters, the vibrant coral reefs.
It sounds magical. From the mountains to the ocean, something for everyone. But what about for someone seeking, a little more of a cultural deep dive?
Oh, I see. You're after those immersive cultural experiences.
I am.
Well, the guide recommends a stay in a traditional Japanese inn, a ryokan.
A ryokan, what's that?
It's like stepping back in time,
Yeah.
sleeping on a futon on tatami floors, experiencing that authentic Japanese hospitality, including, get this, an elaborate multi-course kaiseki meal.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm putting that on my list. But, for those of us who thrive on that hands-on learning.
You want something a little more interactive?
I do.
Okay, well, the guide has a suggestion for that, too. It recommends taking a Thai cooking class.
Oh, fun.
Right. And it emphasizes it's more than just learning recipes. It's about understanding those balances of flavors, the cultural significance behind each dish, the ingredients. You even get to visit local markets to source those fresh ingredients.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, that's definitely going on my list.
Yeah.
But what about for someone who just really wants to experience daily life in another culture?
Like really embed themselves.
Totally.
Oh, the guide has the perfect suggestion for that. A Vietnamese homestay.
A homestay.
Yeah, you live with a local family in a rural village.
Yeah.
You participate in their daily activities, their routines, their customs.
Wow.
It's about more than just observing. It's about actually engaging with the family and their way of life.
And that's what I call a deep dive. All these experiences sound incredible, but let's be real for a second.
What's that?
The logistics of planning a trip like this
Yeah,
could feel overwhelming.
it could be.
So I'm wondering, does the guide offer any practical advice, especially for pre-trip planning?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's where the guide really shines.
Yeah.
It offers this clear, actionable advice.
Okay, good.
Like it stresses the importance of researching visa requirements.
Yeah.
Depending on your nationality and where you're going, those can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught out at the border.
Exactly.
Mm.
It also talks about understanding local customs, to avoid any faux pas, and being aware of peak seasons so you're not caught off guard by crowds or inflated prices.
Oh, those are all really important things to consider. And in today's world, staying connected is crucial. So does the guide talk about that at all?
Oh, absolutely. It specifically recommends getting a regional SIM card or a portable Wi-Fi device.
Sure.
It emphasizes how important those are for navigation, for communication, for research on the go. It even suggests downloading offline maps and translation apps before you go.
Oh, it's brilliant.
So you're prepared even if you don't have consistent internet access.
I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where that would have been a lifesaver. Speaking of being prepared, does the guide offer a packing list?
It does. It does. And it's not just about the usual clothes and toiletries,
Mm-hmm.
It encourages packing with a certain mindset.
Ooh, I like that. Packing mindset.
Right. For example, it really emphasizes the importance of a reusable water bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Speaks to that eco-conscious traveler.
Right.
And comfortable shoes. Those are a must for all the exploring you'll be doing.
It's like pack your attitude along with your essentials, right?
Exactly. Now, let's be realistic. Budget is a major factor for many travelers.
It is.
So does the guide offer any advice for those of us who want to experience Asia without, breaking the bank?
Yeah, without spending a fortune.
Exactly. And it does. It dedicates a whole section to budget-friendly travel, and it's full of really insightful tips. One thing it emphasizes is choosing the right transportation.
Transportation, okay. I'm all ears. What are some of its recommendations?
Well, besides, the usual advice about utilizing budget airlines, it suggests considering overnight buses.
Yeah.
Especially for longer journeys.
Oh, interesting.
Not only does that save money on accommodation, but it also maximizes your sightseeing time. You're traveling while you sleep.
Oh, that's efficient.
Right. It fits perfectly with that learner mindset.
Yeah.
And then it highlights train travel, as a way to experience the beauty of the countryside.
Ooh, I love train travel.
It really is special. It even gives you specific train routes known for spectacular scenery.
Oh, give me some examples.
Sure, like the Reunification Express in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
It travels the length of the country. Or the Trans-Siberian Railway.
Oh, wow.
It traverses Russia, offers glimpses of Mongolia and China.
Oh, that's going on my list. What about accommodation, though? Because hotels can really eat into a travel budget.
They can.
Yeah.
And that's why the guide recommends exploring alternatives like hostels, guest houses, and even homestays.
Homestays. Now, I've always been a little curious about those. Does the guide explain what those actually entail?
It does. It describes homestays as opportunities to live with local families and experience those daily routines firsthand. It really stresses, it's not like staying in a hotel. It's about active participation in family life.
Okay, now that sounds like a true cultural experience. And I imagine it also saves you money on accommodation.
It does.
What about food, though? Because eating out for every meal can get expensive.
It can.
Does the guide address that?
Oh, absolutely. It encourages you to embrace the world of street food.
Ooh, street food.
Right. It's a way to experience those authentic local flavors, and often at a fraction of the cost of restaurants.
I'm a huge fan of street food.
Aren't we all?
It's the best way to, like, discover the true culinary gems of a place. Does the guide give any tips for people new to the street food scene?
It does. It recommends focusing on street food during the breakfast hours. Apparently, that's when you find the freshest ingredients and the most traditional dishes.
Oh, that's a good tip. I'll have to remember that. But what about activities? Surely those can add up quickly.
Not necessarily. The guide recommends seeking out free walking tours,
Free walking tours. Okay.
often led by locals who are passionate about their city and can show you those hidden gems.
Oh, that's cool.
It also suggests exploring free or low-cost attractions, like parks, temples, markets.
Those are excellent suggestions. So we've covered transportation, accommodation, food, activities. Any other money-saving tips from the guide?
Well, it encourages travelers to bargain, especially in markets or with taxi drivers.
Bargaining. Okay. That can be a little intimidating for some people, but it's a common practice in many parts of Asia.
It is, it is. And the guide actually gives you tips on how to do it respectfully and effectively.
Hmm.
It emphasizes it's not supposed to be a confrontation. It's like this friendly back and forth.
Right.
And it's perfectly acceptable to walk away if you're not happy with the price.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I'll have to brush up on my bargaining skills. Any other money-saving gems?
Yes, it recommends using local currency whenever possible
Okay.
to avoid those extra fees
All right.
and to support the local economy. And it encourages travelers to be mindful of their souvenir purchases, choosing meaningful items
Mhm.
over just impulse buys.
That's a good point. It's easy to get carried away in those souvenir shops. So we've established traveling in Asia can be done on a budget. But what about traveling responsibly? Does the guide touch on sustainable tourism at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, it dedicates a whole section to sustainable travel. And it emphasizes it's not just about protecting the environment. It's also about respecting local cultures and supporting local communities.
That's such an important point.
It is.
It's about like being mindful of your impact, ensuring your travels benefit the places you visit and not just yourself.
Exactly. And the guide actually gives you concrete actions you can take to travel more sustainably.
Ooh, okay. I want to hear about that, but I think we need to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. It's really awesome how this guide, Conquer Asia,
Yeah.
manages to give us all this practical advice, but also encourages us to be mindful travelers.
Right. Like it really gets that travelers today, we're not just looking for a vacation. We want something meaningful.
We want to experience something real.
Yeah.
Right?
And leave a positive impact.
Exactly. And speaking of positive impact, let's get into the guide's take on sustainable travel.
Okay. I'm ready to learn how to be a better traveler. Where do we start?
Well, the guide breaks it down into three main things: minimizing your environmental footprint, respecting local cultures, and supporting local economies.
Okay.
And it makes a good point. These aren't just, vague ideas. They're things you can actually do.
I like that. It's not about guilt. It's about giving us like actionable steps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So first up, how can we lessen our impact on the environment while traveling?
Yeah, good question.
One of the simplest things, the guide says, is reducing waste. It's all about those little things, like carrying a reusable water bottle.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Refill it whenever you can. It even mentions that a lot of Asian countries have refill stations in public places, so you don't have to keep buying plastic bottles,
Oh, that's good to know.
isn't it? The guide also says to pack reusable shopping bags, say no to plastic straws and, those plastic cutlery sets. Ditch those too. It even suggests bringing a reusable container for leftovers or takeaway food.
Oh, smart. Less waste, and you save money.
Right. It's all about shifting our mindset from convenience to being more aware, more conscious.
I like that.
Now, beyond just the trash we create, respecting local cultures is huge when it comes to sustainable travel.
Oh, totally. I mean, when we travel to another country, we're guests, right?
Exactly. Guests in someone else's home. So how does the guide approach this whole cultural sensitivity thing?
Yeah. What are their tips?
The biggest thing is to do your research before you even go.
Before you even pack your bags.
Exactly. Learn about the customs, the traditions. Dress appropriately, Be mindful of what's considered normal there, not just what you're used to. Like in some Asian countries, it's super disrespectful to point with your feet
Really? See, I wouldn't have known that.
or to show the soles of your shoes to someone.
Interesting. Little things like that can make a big difference.
Huge difference. And the guide gives you some specific ways to show respect, like learning even a few basic phrases in the local language.
Yeah. Even just hello and thank you. I bet that goes a long way.
It shows you're making an effort. The guide also talks about being mindful of your behavior, especially in religious places or like sacred spaces.
Right, being respectful of their beliefs.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about supporting local economies. How can we make sure our money actually benefits the communities we're visiting?
That's a good question. What does the guide say?
One of the main things is to choose locally owned places whenever you can.
Okay, so like local accommodations, restaurants, shops.
Yep. That way, your money stays within the community. Plus, it usually leads to more authentic experiences.
Yeah, like instead of staying at some big chain hotel, you could be at a family-run guest house and actually chat with the owners, learn about their lives.
Exactly. Way more enriching. And when it comes to food, skip those tourist traps.
Ooh, yes.
Find those little local eateries, the street food stalls. Not only will you discover some amazing food, but you'll be supporting local cooks, local businesses.
Love that. And souvenirs too, right?
Absolutely. Skip the mass-produced stuff and look for unique handicrafts. The guide even tells you what to look for in different regions, like hand-woven textiles in Southeast Asia, wood carvings in Bali, or beautiful ceramics in Japan.
Oh, that's so cool. So you're bringing back a piece of the culture and supporting local artists at the same time. But beyond just like our spending habits, are there other ways to support the communities we visit?
The guide suggests looking into community-based tourism.
Community-based tourism. Okay, what is that exactly?
So it's basically working directly with the local community
Okay.
to create tourism activities that benefit them directly. Things like homestays in rural villages, tours led by local residents, or workshops where you learn traditional skills.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's really experiencing a place through the eyes of the people who live there.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
I like it. Now, before we move on, I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier, packing with intention, packing with a mindset. What does that actually mean?
So the guide's packing list isn't just a list, right? It's about thinking about the impact of what you bring, like choosing versatile clothes that you can mix and match.
So you don't overpack.
Exactly. And maybe even clothes made from sustainable materials like organic cotton or recycled fabrics.
Oh, I like that. I'm all about that.
It also reminds you to pack a little first aid kit, bandages, pain relievers, those essentials, just in case.
Always good to be prepared, especially when you're in a new place.
Right? And don't forget a universal adapter so you can charge your electronics.
Oh, yeah. Crucial.
And a headlamp or a flashlight. Those can come in handy, for those dark streets or in case there's a power outage.
Very practical tips. Okay, so we've talked about traveling responsibly, packing smart, but we can't forget about safety, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the guide doesn't sugarcoat it. It has a whole section on safety tips.
Good. Because while Asia is generally considered safe, it's always smart to be prepared.
Exactly. And one of the most important things, it says, is to stay informed.
Stay informed. Okay. So what does that look like in practice?
Check those travel advisories before you go. Keep up with the local news. Be aware of any scams or safety issues in the areas you're visiting.
Good advice.
It also says to register with your embassy or consulate.
Oh, right. So that they can contact you if something happens.
Exactly. But what about just your personal safety while you're out exploring?
Yeah, like walking around, being in crowded markets, that kind of thing.
Right. The guide says to use common sense, take precautions. Don't walk alone at night in areas you don't know. Keep your valuables safe. Be aware of your surroundings, who's around you. It even suggests learning some basic self-defense.
Oh, interesting.
And carrying a personal alarm or a whistle, just in case.
Smart. Okay, so safety covered. What about health? Any tips there?
Oh, yeah. Get those vaccinations you need. Take precautions against those food and waterborne illnesses.
Food poisoning on vacation is the worst.
It is. And it gives specific tips for eating safely, like avoiding raw fruits and veggies that haven't been peeled or cooked and sticking to bottled or purified water.
Solid advice, especially for, people new to Asia or with sensitive stomachs.
But definitely better to be safe than sorry. Now, I think we've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've gone through sustainable travel, packing tips, safety, health.
It's been so informative. I feel way more prepared to plan a trip to Asia, one that's both meaningful and responsible.
That's what we like to hear.
But I think there's still more to uncover, right?
There is. In our final segment, we'll explore some of the guide's insights on cultural etiquette. Those specific communication tips for navigating different Asian cultures.
All right, final part of our deep dive into Conquer Asia. We've covered so much. I mean, dream destinations, how to have those immersive experiences, tips on budgeting, being a responsible traveler.
It really is a fantastic guide, isn't it?
Mhm.
Packed with info, but also like encouraging us to be mindful explorers.
Right. It's like having that friend who's traveled a ton, and they're giving you all the insider tips, not just the stuff you find in any old guidebook.
Exactly. And speaking of those insider tips, I'm excited to dig into the guide's advice on communication and etiquette.
Yeah. This part's so important, right? Like to actually have smooth, enjoyable interactions when you're traveling.
It's key. It's what makes or breaks a trip, honestly.
So, what are some of those like golden nuggets of communication wisdom that the guide offers?
Well, one of the first things it points out is that nonverbal communication, your body language, facial expressions, all that, it's a huge EE in many Asian cultures.
Oh, yeah, I can see how that could easily lead to misunderstandings if you're not aware.
Right. Like what we consider normal here might be totally different there. Like the guide explains that in some cultures, direct eye contact can be seen as aggressive.
Really? Wow. See, I would thought that was a sign of respect, paying attention.
Yeah, here, maybe. But in some Asian cultures, it can be interpreted as challenging someone.
Fascinating. Okay, what else? What other examples does it give?
Let's see. Oh, physical touch. Even something casual like a pat on the back can be a no-no in certain situations.
Okay, so we got to be really mindful of our body language.
Totally. But the good news is the guide gives you specific tips to help navigate those differences. Like avoid pointing with your finger.
Oh, right. I've heard that before.
Yeah, it can be considered rude in some places. Instead, use an open hand gesture or just nod your head in the direction you mean,
Good to know. It's amazing how much we communicate without even speaking.
isn't it? Now, beyond body language, the guide has some great tips for like actually talking to people, especially when there's a language barrier.
Yeah, because that's inevitable when you're traveling.
Totally. So, speak clearly, slowly, be patient. Communication breakdowns are going to happen. It's all part of the adventure.
A little patience goes a long way. Does the guide give advice for like actually overcoming those language barriers?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Learn a few basic phrases, even if it's just hello, thank you, excuse me.
Right. Even those little phrases, I feel like they show you're making an effort.
Exactly. It shows respect.
Mhm.
And if you're really struggling, use gestures, pictures, or, there's always those translation apps.
Technology to the rescue. Okay, so we've talked communication. What about cultural etiquette in general? What else should we be mindful of?
One of the biggest things is respecting elders.
Right. Showing respect for elders, that's pretty universal. How does that play out specifically in Asian cultures, though?
So in a lot of places, it's customary to bow to elders, use those honorific titles when addressing them, offer them your seat, let them go first in lines.
Those are all really thoughtful gestures. What else?
Modest dress is important, especially when you're visiting religious sites or more traditional communities. Might mean covering shoulders and knees, maybe even wearing a headscarf.
Right, makes sense. It's about fitting in, not standing out in a way that's disrespectful.
Exactly. Now, another big one is dining etiquette. There are some really interesting customs depending on where you are.
Oh, I'm curious. Tell me more about that.
For instance, in some countries, you shouldn't start eating until everyone at the table has their food. But then, in other places, it's totally normal, even encouraged, to slurp your noodles.
Oh, I love slurping noodles. It's the best way to enjoy them, right?
Right. So it all comes down to observing and following the lead of your hosts.
I love how the guide has all these specific examples. It makes it so much easier to grasp those cultural differences.
It takes the guesswork out of it. And it shows you, hey, these differences, they're not something to be afraid of. They're what make traveling so amazing.
Well said. This deep dive into Conquer Asia, honestly, it's not just given me travel tips. It's given me a whole new perspective on how to be a better, more thoughtful traveler.
Me too. It really is more than just a guidebook.
So to our listener, if you're feeling that travel bug, if Asia's calling your name, grab a copy of Conquer Asia and start planning. It's got everything you need for an unforgettable adventure. Remember, the best trips are the ones where you connect with the place, the